Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Film Club podcast, where every month we deep dive into a different aspect of cinema. Directors, actors, franchises, or genres. It's always fun at the Film Club. I'm Dean.
I'm Boo.
And this month we're talking about...
Movies about movies.
And this week we're talking about...
Gods and Monsters.
Gods and Monsters. 1998 stars Sir Ian McKellen, Brendan Fraser.
Sir Brendan Fraser.
He's not English, but whatever.
Doesn't matter.
It is directed by Bill Condon. This is a Oscar bait movie of the late 90s that kind of still works, honestly.
Yes.
You know, lightly. It's pretty good, you know.
Yeah, I mean, kind of gives you the feeling of like a TV movie.
Yes.
But then, you know, it's like, wow, some of these scenes in the movie are just so high scale and just, you know...
Very expressionistic.
Very deep.
It is definitely one of those movies that, yeah, it has a feel of like a TV movie, a little cheaper, but goddamn, the grade of actor in this is so solid.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have two of the biggest actors and portraying, you know... one of the biggest horror franchises of all time. Well, I don't know if I could call it a franchise because he just directed the first two movies.
The rest were done by hacks.
I love that joke. And I love the fact that he doesn't even let him finish saying the rest of the title of the movie. He's like, son of, and he's like, nope, didn't do that one.
It's one of those things where this is done right before Ian McKellen does Lord of the Rings and
Yes.
X-Men. This is done before Brendan Fraser breaks out and becomes... a star of the century.
This is before Rick O'Connell.
This is before The Mummy. This is before George of the Jungle.
Yes.
And it's it is something else. It is something else.
Yes. But before we jump into the movie, I think we need to read the back of the box.
Oh, you want to start early with the back of the box, I see.
I feel like we have to.
That means she has a lot to say about this movie, everybody, because the back of the box for Gods and Monsters is actually pretty tight.
Okay.
It'll be interesting.
Okay.
In the twilight of the life of James Whale, sorry.
Tight, huh?
Very tight. In the twilight of the life of James Whale, the famed director of Frankenstein, he begins to come to grips with his life after a stroke that has threatened to leave him a vegetable. Whale decides to make one last connection before he dies in his befriending of the ex-Marine and gardener Clay Boone. As their relationship grows, Whale loses his grip on reality and his mind, leading him to the film climb. God damn, I can't read my own handwriting.
No, you can't.
I'm doing this, all right? And his mind leading him to the film's climax where he attempts to bait Clay into killing him to save him from his fate. You want me to run through that one more time?
No. We tried.
I'll go. Okay, I got it. Okay. In the twilight of the life of James Whale, the famed director of Frankenstein, he begins to come to grips with his life after a stroke that has threatened to leave him a vegetable. Whale decides to make one last connection by befriending his gardener and ex-Marine Clay Boone. As their relationship grows and Whale loses his grip on reality and his mind, leading him to the final climax, where he attempts to bait Clay into killing him to save him from his fate.
There you go.
There's also a whole romantic subplot of James Whale being very openly gay and Boone being not that way, and them having a very, very charged sexual tension in the entire film.
Brawl.
And brawl and light assault. Well, there's some shit in this movie.
Yes, there's a lot in this movie. Apart from, you know, the fantastical kind of, you know, feeling of this movie where we go back to the filming of The Bride of Frankenstein and these dream sequences, and we go back to the First World War. I kind of love that, you know, this is, you know, fiction, non-fiction kind of movie. Because this is documenting the last days of James Whale, because he really did commit suicide. He was suffering from strokes, and it was affecting his mind. It was a thing where, you know, they were so surprised that it wasn't affecting him physically. You know, he was very much able to take care of himself, but it was attacking the mind. And just to see, you know, kind of how, you know, the strokes and old age were just ravaging his brain, and just how, you know, he's jumping back from, you know, his career, the war, his childhood. And, you know, my grandparents both had dementia before they passed. So it was kind of, you know, relatable, where I was able to see they have those moments where they drift off and they're somewhere else. And it's just like, wow, this is very surreal, but interesting to see where his brain takes him in the movie.
Yeah, the whole movie has this very interesting aesthetic and this very interesting way of showing Whale as he kind of deteriorates. Because the whole movie is dictated by Whale kind of losing it.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way that's like very sad and tragic, because when we meet him, he is flamboyant. He's the queen of California. He is this great big personality. And by the end of it, he is so sad that he's become this thing that
He's
is
a
not
shell.
him. Yeah, he's a shell of himself.
And, you know, it's kind of shocking because, yes, he's very over the top and, you know, strong, but we're learning, you know, at the same time, he's just gotten out of the hospital. And we're not sure how long he was in there. He had, you know, either a major stroke or a couple of them. And at this time, you know, there wasn't much that they could do.
It takes place in like 57, I think.
57, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's this thing where it's like, you know, wow, you just came out of the hospital and, you know, you're firing on all cylinders, but he's firing because he's not taking the medication. And he explains that too, you know. His recent ex, but they'd been life partners for like 20 years, where it's just, you know, I take the medication and, you know, it
zonks me out.
It zonks him out. It makes him dopey. He doesn't really know where he is. And his partner is like, well, take the medication, because otherwise, you know, it's your brain is just firing on all different cylinders and you're, you know, having these memories, these flashbacks, these horrible headaches. But it's the struggle of, I want relief, but I also want to be myself.
Yeah, and that is like the core of Whale's character in the movie. And the movie is so full of this very like sad melancholy. It's James Whale's kind of being very sad that his legacy is tied up in Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein and his monster pictures, when he's like, guys, I made Showboat, like that. I'm really proud of that.
And, you know, my crown jewel of my career was going to be this war epic. And they completely botched it. The studio botched it, and they brought in someone else to throw in some stuff in there. And because it failed, it flopped at the box office, I took the rap for that. When it was really, this was a serious picture, and this was going to be, you know, the crown jewel of my career, and you took it away.
And the whole movie has that very melancholy vibe, and it really is this real hard drama, but we are seeing a lot of it through his gardener Clay Boone, and this is where it mixes biography with fiction.
Yeah, because this movie is based on a book called Father of Frankenstein. It was released in 1995 by Christopher Brom. He studied like the last months of James Whale's life. So this is where we see, you know, the reality and then the fiction, where, you know, Clay Boone comes in, and Clay just happens to be, you know, a perfectly good scale of Frankenstein's monster.
It is funny when he's like, you have such a perfect skull shape, and it's like, yeah, because his head is shaped like Frankenstein.
Yeah,
like he has the haircut, like the flat top deal, you know.
He's
the whole
tall,
nine.
he's muscular. It's like, yeah, you are kind of perfect. And, you know, it's, I mean, I love this movie because, you know, just the way it wraps up at the end. But
there's also the whole thing where it's like there's the I wasn't kidding. There's a lot of like sexual tension,
Yeah.
you know, male gaze, homoeroticism going on in the movie, and that is like the driving thing of the movie is James Whale's relationship to Clay Boone. Clay Boone, and Clay is, you know, like ultra straight, like man's man thing.
He's a Marine.
Yeah, and James Whale is like, well, how straight are you, Mr. Clay?
But I love that, you know, they do have their blow-ups in the movie.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a thing where even during their worst fights with each other, they still kind of like, you know, I'm sorry, I took that too far. They have an actual relationship.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because as the movie is progressing, it changes from I'm I think we're gonna have to explain like how the movie works out to make
Yeah.
this make sense. Okay, so we'll start from the top.
Yes.
So the movie starts and we introduced to James Whale, Mr. Jimmy, fabulous, living in the lap of luxury in Beverly Hills.
Uh, Pacific Palisades, but rarely shot in Pasadena.
Like everything.
Yeah.
And he's doing this interview with this very I don't know how to describe this character.
Fanboy.
Fanboy, yeah.
I mean, being able to meet a director, we met John Carpenter.
Yep.
And I mean, that was kind of our nervous energy. We were just so excited, like, oh my God, I want to talk about, the movies that I absolutely love that you made.
But we were not this guy.
No.
This guy is like almost insultingly fanboyish.
Yeah, and it's like, you have James Whale that's trying to say, oh, okay, you want to know about my career, this is where my life started, and he's just, can we talk about Frankenstein? Can we talk about Frankenstein?
Can we talk about the part of your career people, are going to remember you for? And he's like, I'm not dead yet, you little shit. And he's like, well, I'm sorry to insult you, but I mean, can we talk about Mr. Karloff? And he's like, oh, fuck you. So there's this whole like strip poker scene where he's like, I'll tell you anything you want, but every question you have to take off a piece of your clothes. And it's this kind of like flirtation thing. And like, the fanboy's like kind of into it. Like, let's be honest here. And it's really playing up the whole movies. And it's going to be this like game, this like sexuality game where James Whale is going to push us and see how far he can go.
Yeah.
And as he's doing this and answering questions, that's when we get the first stroke, right? Or it's the first in the movie. It's the second one he's had in storyline.
I don't think it's a stroke. I think it's just
a spell.
It might be a spell because right away, his maid, I can't think of her name.
Hannah.
Hannah, thank you. She comes with all the medication, so it might be a spell. It's one of those things because he drops the cigar and he goes to reach it, and it's like kind of that thing where you like bend down to pick something up. And it's like all the blood rushes to your head and it kind of, makes you feel a little off. So it's one of those spells where, he was fine. He's totally engaged in the conversation. And, just like that, he shifts into, he really is sick. And it's like, the bravado can be there, but, the body demands what it's feeling. And, we get that where he has to cancel this interview that he's excited to do because he's been out of the limelight for 20 years, and it's like, wow, someone wants to talk to me. They want to hear about my career, and it gets pulled away from him. And
that's the thing that's establishing this theme of his melancholy nature of his own legacy, right? Yeah. He's like, oh, I'm going to be remembered as the man that created this monster, right? Not the man who created, like musicals and was an artist. He's going to be remembered as like the genre guy. And like the
man that was a prisoner of war.
Yeah, he was a World War I vet, like all these other things.
He was in a camp for a year, and it's just like my God, this man's story is so fascinating, but everyone wants to know just about the monsters.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting thing for the movie to kind of open up with. It's kind of fascinating where it's like, oh, he's the guy that made Frankenstein. That's why you guys all wanted to be here. And as soon as the audience is like, oh, we're going to learn about Frankenstein, he's like, that's not what the fucking movie's about, asshole. Like, Sir Ian McKellen's gonna try and win himself a goddamn Oscar.
Yeah.
And after this, we get introduced to Brendan Fraser's character, Clay Boone. And Clay is, the gardener. Big, strapping chap,
Keeps to himself,
kind of quiet. And this is when, James Whale is like, well, he's a tall drink of iced tea. Let's, go hang out with him. And this is where I'm trying to figure out, right? Did James Whale want to seduce Boone, create a friendship with Boone? Or did he already see Boone as a conduit to his suicide?
I think in that scene, it was more, attraction. Because we see him from afar. He's fighting with the lawnmower or whatever piece of machinery he has. He's fighting with it, and he's in, a muscle shirt. So it's like, oh, wow, look at this hot guy. But I think, this is where, being just a regular person to where the artist kicks in. And he's like, wow, this guy is very statuesque. you know, it's like I'm attracted, but at the same time, you're igniting that spark where I want to sketch, I want to, you know, create a piece that looks like you.
It's something where he looks at him and there is that like, oh well, he's like attracted to him. He wants like a relationship there in the sexual manner, but it is a thing where his play is like, oh, I would love to draw you. Can you come to my studio? I'll pay you for your time. We can do these little sessions. I just want to draw you. You have such an architectural skull and whatever. And his hair in the moment is literally playing into like Frankenstein, right? The little wink at the camera, right?
Exactly.
And once he does that, this is kind of the movie is he like Clay shows up. James Wales like draws him for a little bit, and then they kind of start reminiscing about something. You know, James Wales is like, "Do you know what drippings are? Oh, they were the fats of like pork and beef and whatnot, and only the poorest of people, you know, ate them. We had ours in a mason jar." He's like, "Oh, you ate drippings?" He's like, "No, only the poor people ate drippings," hiding the fact that he was like incredibly poor and all this other fun stuff.
But he has that aha moment where he's like, why am I trying to hide that? Like, you know, I'm embarrassed of this thing that I experienced, but it's like, look at me now. You know, I'm here, you know, in my mansion. And it's like, yeah, you know, I am a real, you know, rags to riches story.
Yeah, and that's like the mode of the movie. Clay, like, Whale is trying to seduce Clay for a lot of it. You know, he's like, oh, I can't draw you like that. You're wearing this white shirt. Just pop your shirt off. You know, I'll draw you without it. And he's like, I'm not wearing an undershirt. And he's like, oh, don't be bashful. Just take your shirt off.
He's like, you know, what do I look like? Your Aunt Tilly? You know, take off the shirt.
Yeah, come on. And it's that thing where James Whale is very slowly and very gradually, you know, like is grooming the right word, or is it more like very flirtatious?
He's goading him, you know, like, you know, come on, you know, we're both men here. Take off your shirt. Who's gonna get, you know, offended?
It's the thing where James Whale is like pushing the steps one step at a time to see how far he can get Clay to be open to this kind of relationship.
You give an inch, he takes a mile.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the movie. And James Whale is, you know, he's charming, endearing or whatever. He's predatory, but he's not creepy.
Yeah.
Right? Well, he'll go creepy in the third act. We'll get to that.
Yeah, it gets very creepy.
And then Clay is, you know, trying to kind of comes to terms with it. He's like...
He's very closed off, and, you know, we start to see him open up more. He's
also kind of dumb.
A little bit, but...
You didn't know he was gay? I just thought he was an artist. I just thought he wanted to draw me shirtless. I don't know.
But I think that's so important to their characters is that they both open each other up. Where, you know, Jimmy's already having these flashbacks, but with Clay there... he's really doing soul searching where he's talking about growing up and, you know, what it was like to be an officer and, you know, the tragedies that he saw when he was serving. And it's just kind of like, you know, wow, I haven't spoken about these things or even thought about these things in years. But there's just something about you that makes me want to tell the truth.
Clay serves as someone that Wales can open up his real legacy to. He's somebody who, like, when they meet, you know, the opening scene is James Wales being so mad that people only remember him from Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And then when he meets Clay, he's like, well, I was kind of famous. You know, I directed Frankenstein. Trying to use that like almost as a come-on line, being like, don't worry, I'm important. And he's like, you made Frankenstein? Really? And that's where our little joke comes from, you know? Only hacks made the sequels.
Yeah.
And... it's a thing where it's like James Wales, as he's having these flashbacks and he's kind of lost in his own memories and his own mind and he's kind of losing it. He's using Clay to almost being like, when I go, you will have a real idea of who I was, my real legacy, like, you know, my experiences in the war that shaped me, you know, the first man I ever loved. I grew up, you know, poor and, you know, I ate drippings in, you know, like the East End of London and I was this and I was that. He's really trying to impart, like, this is me, and I want you to know that because when I'm gone, I don't want people to only remember Frankenstein.
Yeah. I want people to know that I was an actual well-rounded person that lived a life, not just, you know, these few years that I created, you know, these memorable movies that'll live on, you know, throughout all time.
Yeah, and it's... There's some great... there is a part I can't remember where it is. I think it's like near the end of the movie. Or no. It might be the midpoint where we flash to him doing Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Great scene.
Yes.
We'll get to that in a second. But the movie, at this point, we're doing the sessions. Clay is trying to figure out James Wales. He's trying to figure it out.
Yes.
And once he does it when he goes to see Bride of Frankenstein because it's on TV.
I mean, I love that whole setup because, you know, he's doing a session. He brings the TV guide and shows him, hey, you know, Bride of Frankenstein's going to play tonight. And James is like, oh, okay. Or Jimmy, he's like, oh, okay, that's cool. But, you know, I prefer The Invisible Man.
Mm-hmm.
And
Man of taste.
I guess, but I prefer Bride of Frankenstein. Sorry.
The Invisible Man is such a good movie. Claude Rains is great. It's Kino.
It is, but you have the full range of Karloff in Bride of Frankenstein.
I have a Titanic cast member in mind.
Yeah, you do, but still Bride of Frankenstein's better.
Yeah.
But, you know, we have this lead up where, you know, Clay goes to Santa Monica City Library, and he's pulling up all these books, and he's like, oh, wow, you know, this guy really isn't, you know, pulling my leg with, you know, oh, yeah, I made Frankenstein, you know, I was this director. It's like, oh, no, this is the actual man. And he goes to the bar, and he's like, we gotta watch it. And all the people are, you know, giving him a hard time. He goes, oh, you know, you're so happy because they're gonna paint your picture and blah, 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 this and that.
They're ragging on him. But, yeah, the bar scene, right? Yeah. Where they're gonna watch Bride of Frankenstein. Or is it Frankenstein or Bride of Frankenstein?
Bride of Frankenstein.
Bride of Frankenstein. And Clay is like, come on, guys, I want to watch the movie. And he's like trying to understand it. You know, he's like, I'm going to see this guy tomorrow. I want to understand like it as a movie. And everyone else is just like, man, these things are so fucking funny. These things are so corny.
They're cheesy. And then you have Benny the bartender being like, oh, you know, it's about necrophilia. And, you know, you have Clay that's like, no, you have this monster that just, you know, wants to be accepted and wants a partner, someone that will be there for him. And it's like he's understanding, you know, the message of the movie, and Jimmy's like, oh, well, you know, I made that for kicks, and, you know, it's funny, but at the same time, there's a lot of, you know, pathos and there's depth in that movie.
Let's be honest, when he's like, did anyone laugh? And he's like, no one laughed. He's like, what a shame. I meant it to be a comedy. How did no one laugh during this movie?
Yeah.
It is a thing where even James Wales is acknowledging, he's like, no, I'm the king of camp. He's like, I basically invented camp.
He did.
And it's like, it is such a interesting scene because they watch it in parallel, right?
Yeah.
Where
he watches it with Hannah, and then we have Clay watching it with their friends. And it's so interesting to see Hannah. I mean, Hannah's hilarious. I mean, she's...
Yeah.
Because she's kind of this, you know, nervous kind of being. And
she's this Eastern European, like, maid who is, like, super religious.
That's why I love, you know, when she tells Clay that, you know, Jimmy's gay. And she's like, I love him so much, but he's going to hell, you know, for the things that he does. And Clay's like, Well,
what has he done? The unspeakable. The thing that no man can speak of without breaking a piece of his soul. Like, she goes, like weird with it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm expecting the cross on her necklace to start growing as she's saying this. Like, just to drive the point home, guys.
And Clay's just like, what? And she goes, buggered. She buggers other man. And then he's like, oh... okay, like,
then,
you know,
and then he's even like, what the fuck does that mean? I don't know that word. Again, Clay's a little dense. All right?
He is, but I love that, you know, we have Clay that understands what's happening in the story. We have the people in the bar that are kind of like, this is cheesy, this is funny. So it's like you have the perfect audience that, you know, that Whale wants. He's like, he wants people to laugh, but he also wants people to understand the seriousness of the story. And at the same time, you have Hannah, who doesn't really grasp the concept that the people are bad in the movie and the monsters are the innocents. And we get to that ending where, you know, the monster kills everybody in the castle, Pretorius, the bride himself, and she goes, oh, what a happy ending. She's like, the good people lived and the bad people died. And it's like, you completely missed the message.
And I love it because the scene after, I think that's when Wales or James really gets that, oh no, Clay's kind of like, Clay gets it. Yeah. Honestly, like, he's like, oh, you're not just a slab of meat, you're like trying here.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
And after that scene is when we get the black and white sequence, the dream sequence.
Yeah, wait, is this before or after it's the cigar scene? because I just wanted to throw out. I think it's like after the cigar scene, because that's when Clay's like, "Oh, you're gay," and he's like, "Well, of course." Where James Whale, Ian McKellen is just sucking on that cigar, and I'm like, there is no subtlety to this anymore.
No.
You are like jonesing for Clay right now.
And Clay's just like, "Oh, cool! I get to smoke a nice cigar."
I love you,
in a
Clay.
Nice house.
I love you, Clay, but god damn, man.
Yeah, Clay's a little dense, but I like that Clay's also kind of like,
It's like that meme where it's the girl who goes up to the guy who's leaning against the wall, and she has her leg up on the wall or whatever. She's like leaning in, and she's like, and he's like, does she like me? I don't know. Huh.
Okay, Clay.
Don't worry about it. But it is just so funny to me that Clay's just picking up on no signals here. Like, not a one.
He isn't. And then, once he's finally clued in, he even tells him, he's like, I don't care,
live and let live.
What your preference is. But he's just like, ease it up on the shop talk. And it's like, I think that's, totally acceptable for whoever you're attracted to. It's like, okay, good for you, whoever you like. But it's like, I don't need to hear all the gory details of, what you do.
I mean, like, it's not even like a thing where he's like, oh, I was in love with a man once when I was in the war. Like, that's not the shop talk he's talking about.
No.
Like, the conversation, I think, that made Clay really uncomfortable was when Wales is telling him about how he had basically, like, pool orgies in the 30s and 40s. And he's like, bro, I don't need to know that there was a bunch of naked men in the room I'm sitting in right now.
In the chair that I'm sitting in.
I don't need to know that,
yeah,
brother.
So, you're able to see the contrast where, Clay doesn't want to hear about, all the naked orgies and the parties that Jimmy had in the past. But once he starts to getting on to, I was in the war and I fell in love with somebody in the war and they died tragically and I survived. Then, he's really engrossed in the story, well, what happened? And it's like, I love seeing that shift in their relationship where it's like, preferences aside, I want to know about you. I want to know what happened to you and how, we ended up to this point.
It's a really like human thing, right? And it's like, well, I don't know your like preferences and all that stuff. I don't get that. But I understand love, and you loved this guy, and he died, and I understand that. I understand that tragedy.
And you've had a partnership for the past 20 years or longer, but it's like what is that like to be with somebody and you have the one that got away, and they just kind of live in the back of your memory.
It is a really like interesting thing because the movie is very wrapped up in James Whale's like love and like that sexuality thing, because like through the movie, I'm sorry I keep like harping on this, but it is like such a big like underpinning of the movie is James is trying to like pull Clay in and try and have Clay have maybe a homosexual experience or something, and James Wales kind of wants that to happen, wants that relationship, and Clay is just not into it. But it does lead into the black and white sections, or like the sequences and things that get into very expressionistic territory.
Well, I mean, no, that's what I was talking about. After they watch The Bride of Frankenstein on TV, that's when we get the sequence where Jimmy is on the slab and Clay is the doctor, and he's the one switching out his brain. And it's this beautiful sequence. Reminded me a lot of Tim Burton, just the way that we pan in on some of the machines, and there's sparks going off, and it's very dramatic in the movements.
Well, it's a direct visual reference to like the James Whale style, Frankenstein, Bride, Invisible Man, Dark House.
But that scene where he's swapping out the brain, Jimmy's old brain that isn't working, it's fried because of the strokes, for this fresh new brain, because that's what he wants. I still feel, physically strong, but the thing that I need the most is, cutting out on me. But it's like, I love that sequence because it's just so artistic and it's beautiful. And, it's interesting to see Clay as the doctor when Clay's really his creation.
Well, I think that's interesting because there is that question that comes up in the end of the movie, which one of us is the monster, which one of us is the creator? And it's like, well, in this, Clay is the creator, and he's like trying to fix James Whale, right? Like by that, he's trying to be his friend. He's trying to connect with him. He's trying to be that like that human connection that he just doesn't really have anymore, and he's like the creator in this aspect, right?
Yeah.
But by the end of the movie, Clay is the one that is the monster, and James is the creator. And then even after that, we get another switch where like he views himself as the monster. We gonna get to that.
Yeah, the movie takes you on a ride.
Yeah, but after we get these, it goes back into now James Whale's kind of like, all right, we understand each other. I'm still drawing you. Clay's like, all right, I'm just like feeling this out. And it is that progression of how far can we go? And then we get to the garden party where the princess shows up.
Yes, the queen's younger sister.
Yes.
And it's like, my God, what are some of these Hollywood parties?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And this is where we get to the garden party. And the garden party sequence is the saddest part of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, let alone having the queen's sister there for the garden party. It's like, what is going on in Hollywood? We have Liz Taylor that's there. We have David, who is Jimmy's ex-life partner.
I think there's still technically a thing. I don't really know. It's very vague.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell, if they've just newly broken up or it's a thing where it's kind of like
David's still in the closet and he doesn't want anyone to know that they're a thing. Because this is again 1957, right?
No, I think it's a thing where people know. Jimmy makes a point of that where it's like, actors, that's where they, they don't care who they sleep with, but
as long as it doesn't make it into the papers.
Exactly. The public persona is important, but the directors, they don't care. And I love that Jimmy's character is so himself. He doesn't, feel the need to hide. I love that he's very proud of who he is. And it's like, I am. And it's like, it's like, and what? It's like, I love that he's, just the strong presence. And it's like, I am who I am and I'm proud of who I am, next.
Yeah, but it is like this thing that James Wales, even in real life, was very like, yeah, I'm incredibly open about it.
It's like,
it is what it is.
Yeah, it's like, that's just part of me. It's like, I'm a human. I'm a whole person. It's like, I've got different facets to me. It's like, why focus on just that?
Like the monsters, which gets us back to the garden party. Because at the garden party, the fanboy from the beginning of the movie is like, hey, Mr. Wales, I'm the one who got you invited. I'm Mr. Kukor's new assistant, secretary, or whatever. And I've also invited your monsters. Why don't we all take a picture? And James Wales is like, oh, well, fuck my life.
Well, what I was saying, because you're saying that this is the saddest part of the movie. He runs into David, and David looks like, you're the last person I want to see at this party. And Jimmy's like, weren't you supposed to be in New York? And he's like, oh, well, I flew in last night and I was going to just see you tomorrow anyway. So I didn't feel the need to tell you that I was going to be here or, if you wanted to join. So it's kind of like, you see, like, Jimmy kind of like gets kicked in the stomach. Like, like, yeah, I'll see you when I see you, I don't care, but how did you get here? It was like, he was part of this. He was a director and, David's like an executive producer. And it's like David's career is still going. And Jimmy's the one that kind of had to take the back seat because the bum rap that he got on that movie.
Yeah, and it is a thing where the reason I say it's so sad is because of that picture where, Elsa Lancaster shows up, also, and Boris Karloff shows up.
The casting is phenomenal in this movie. I mean, Sir Ian McKellen looks like James Whale. You have Brendan Fraser who looks, so much like Frankenstein's monster.
Well, yeah, I mean, like he's just this big statuesque kind of guy. But the thing is, because I know you were going to get to the guy that plays Boris Karloff that looks exactly like him,
Jack Betts.
Yeah, there's a bunch of prosthetics on him that just blends so well, like dead ringer for Karloff.
I mean, it's spooky in that scene because Rosalind Ayers, I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name. I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong. Who plays Elsa Lancaster, you see her first and you're like, oh my God, that's Elsa. And then
the nose Elsa Lancaster had a very distinct nose, and that's still, the only thing that throws me.
But she, is pretty good. But, Jack Betts, who plays Karloff in the movie, dead ringer. And it's like, oh my God, the three of them together.
I
it's
know
just
you're like fangirling out right now because you're like, oh my god, that'd be so great to see. But
yeah,
to James Whale, it is so depressing.
normally I would be fangirling out, but in that sequence, he's already feeling weak. You see him, kind of, hobbling to get up to the chairs. And then just kind of like, he's already on the edge of losing it. And then, he gets thrown into this picture with his monsters. And it's just, you feel so bad for him. And you feel bad for the actors, too, where it's like, I've moved on. I want to be, known for me. But we're kind of typecast as these characters for the rest of our lives.
That cutting, like, comment, from Elsa Lancaster's to James Whale's like, don't you love being famous?
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Yeah.
That sad thing where it's like, oh, my legacy is tied up into one thing.
Yeah.
Like, I've worked so hard to do so many things and express my art, but I will be remembered for this thing that I do not feel is the best thing I have done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like so sad, and it's so like again, melancholy. I describe much of the movie as a very melancholy look at the life of this man.
And things, really take a shift when he sees the love of his life, just far on the grass, just standing there watching him.
Yeah, which is a flashback to his World War I
Yes.
love, which there's a whole like really sad story where he says, he's like, oh, I was this officer, and the boy I fell in love with over there, he was one of my underlings, right?
Yeah.
And he goes out across the wire. Somebody took him without, my
Mm-hmm.
permission to show him some real action. And he gets killed, and he gets stuck in the wire.
Yeah.
But he's too far for anyone to retrieve him, so they wake up every day, and he has to see this guy that he loved
Mm-hmm.
deteriorate for like a year?
Yeah, a year or 2 years.
Yeah, until he like leaves. Like he leaves
Yeah.
the front, and he's still up there.
And he's still in the wires, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like that's so dark, to see this person you like really loved like rot away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, oh, that would fuck so many people up. That would fuck
yeah.
everybody up.
Oh, yeah.
And then like you see that, and we get back to his manor. Like it starts raining, right? And Clay, he's with Jimmy because he's like, hey, I've never met a queen, or I've never met a princess before. Let's go. That sounds cool.
Yeah, and he drives him to the party, and he's seeing that, Jimmy's kind of starting to deteriorate at the party, so it's like, let me get you home safely. Hannah's not there because her daughter's in town, so it's just the two of them in the house.
And
this is when Jimmy's kind of like, this is my only time that I could strike.
Yes, and he has been kind of, again, grooming or playing up or like
Mhm.
pushing the line
Yeah.
with Clay and being like, hey, I want this or this,
Mhm.
hey, why don't you do this, do that, playing it up until this. And here, Clay is gonna change, right? He's gonna go and like change his clothes because they're all wet, and James is like, here's like an old sweater, but I don't have any pants to wear this towel, right?
Yeah.
And Jimmy tells him like, I'm sorry, I need to tell you something. All these drawings I've done of you have been nothing. He's like, I've had these strokes. My motor skills are shot. I can't draw anymore. I can't create art anymore.
And it's not like, he's lying to him. He's showing him all the sketches that he's attempted to do, and it's scribbles, compared to seeing, the paintings that are around the studio, his sketches.
The sketch of Frankenstein's monster we see.
Yeah. And it's just like, it's like, I can't do it. I've done this my entire life. I've sketched, I've painted, and it's just gone.
His first art is the last art to leave him.
Yeah.
And Clay feels so like sad about this. He's like, I'm sorry. And then this is where Clay decides to take a step towards Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
Decides to say, you know what? Let's see where this goes. And he stands up, takes off the sweater, drops the towel, and it's, Brendan Fraser standing there, as naked as God made him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, you said you wanted me to paint you like a statue. Let's see where this goes.
I'm a statue.
And Jimmy, this is where he's finally like, okay, now's the moment. Now's the time to strike.
Yep.
He goes, he grabs a gas mask from like World War I, like a army keepsake.
We see that earlier in the day, that same day, the garden party and this moment. And that's when we see, he's having even more flashbacks And it's kind of like, this is the beginning of the end.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, we're going to come full circle. I'm going to put the mask on you and use it against you.
Yeah, he puts the mask onto Clay, and he's like, oh, I want to do this so, we have this humanistic body, and we want this inhuman face, and I want to see the artistic thing. And then Clay puts it on, he's like, okay, whatever. And he's like, hey, this is, like, kind of tight. I can't really, like, breathe well in here. And then Jimmy is, like, starts, like, hard coming on to him, being like, oh, don't worry, I can hear you, it's okay. Oh, maybe I can, feel you too. And he's like, Jimmy, can you not? And then he like goes takes a grab of the family jewels, right?
Yeah,
and then Clay is like, okay, I'm throwing hands now, and starts like, again pushes, Jimmy off of him, and there's a whole like little struggle.
He doesn't even start to throw hands until Jimmy says, you know what, I'm gonna tell everybody, you were alone in this house with me, you took off your clothes, you wanted this. And that's when, they really start to, throw hands with each other.
Yeah. And then, Clay's like, what do you want? He's like, for you to kill me. I want you to kill me. Because
and you could see the madness in his eyes.
I want you to kill me because if you kill me, then I might be able to bear death. Because he doesn't want to be this guy who cannot create. He doesn't want to be this he doesn't want
vegetable. To deteriorate.
He doesn't want to be nothing. He wants to still die as Jimmy.
I'm gonna go out in a blaze of glory, even if it's hand-to-hand combat. I'm going out instead of just getting worse and worse as the days progress.
It's better to burn out than to fade away.
Yes.
And Clay is like, I am not your monster. Because throughout the movie, Jimmy's kind of like created Clay to be the monster, the tool of his suicide.
Yes.
And Clay rejects that because like Frankenstein, right? Coming back to old Frankie here. He's like, well, Dr. Frankenstein created the monster to be this one thing, but the monster is like, I am not what you created. I am myself, and I am so sad and full of emotions. I'm not a monster. I'm a man.
I'm a person.
I'm a person, damn it. I'm a person, damn it.
And I love that scene because, for most of the movie, we've seen Clay is kind of, closed off, serious, angry. Jimmy breaks him.
Yep. And Jimmy's like, I'm so sorry, Mr. Boone.
He's like, you really are a pussycat. And it's like, yeah, this tough bravado that that Clay gives off. It's like, no, you really are, a tender soul underneath, the muscles and he doesn't even get off an attitude. It's just he's very, to himself.
It's the thing, and it's even the thing where he's like an ex-Marine, but this whole time Jimmy's been like, oh, you must have served in Korea, are trying to have this war bond, and he's like, I got appendicitis in boot camp. I never saw combat.
It ended my career.
He's like, I got kicked out of the Marines, or honorable discharge, so I don't have war stories,
And then Jimmy's like, that's where you're wrong. You do have, stories. And
it's the thing where the next morning, Clay's like, Clay puts Jimmy to bed because Jimmy is now in a bad way.
Yeah.
Like, not only that he just tried to commit suicide by getting Clay to kill him, but also he's like, he can't like undo his shirt anymore. He can't really like use his hands anymore.
And that's why I love Clay because, he's just been sexually assaulted, physically assaulted, and, soul's been broken. But at the same time, he's such a stand-up guy where, he could have just left him there. He's like, you know what, let me help you get into bed. Let me help you, with your shirt. And I'm going to stay here for the night because there's no one here with you. I'm going to make sure, if anything happens, I'm here if you need me.
And the next morning comes, and
Hannah comes home.
And she's like, I do not want to know what you two did in the night. I see you are naked on the couch. I do not see this, but Jesus sees this, so you must repent.
And Clay's like, I'm literally just in a chair, uncomfortable, sleeping, making sure that your boss is okay.
He's like, look, this isn't what it looks like. And she's like, I do not care. Jesus will decide. And then they make the tragic discovery that Jimmy has thrown himself into the pool
and committed suicide
and killed himself, which is
factually correct
to life. Yeah, James Wells, he killed himself. I think he was only like in his early 60s, I think.
I believe so. He wore his finest suit. He did leave a note. So, Clay, the character of Clay, doesn't exist in real life. So I believe it was David, and it must have been, if it wasn't Hannah, whoever else was on staff that day.
His actual maid, I think his maid's name was like Maria or something like that.
Yeah.
His actual maid.
They found him. David hid the note. So it was ruled an accident, and it wasn't until David passed away, and it was, I think, James Whale's historian and someone else connected to David, they found out that, no, he really did commit suicide and did it on his terms, because that is James Whale. James Whale is going to do what he wants to do, and he did.
And it gets to this, like really sad thing where, Hannah's like, I know you stray away from God's light, but oh, God must love you. Please, I hope to see you again. Again, Hannah is this character that is very, jarring to me.
Well, it's also, Hannah is a widow, and James doesn't say how long that Hannah's been working for him.
Oh, I think that she said 15 years.
But it's a thing where he goes, she's seen me at my best, and now she's seeing me at my worst, and the longer that your staff stays with you, the more they feel like, they're connected to you, and they could tell you, instead of just, I'm the boss, you listen to me.
I'm not talking about the characterization. I'm talking about the cartoonish Eastern European accent that throws me through the fucking movie.
Well, no, I'm talking about how, because she's kissing him, and she's, saying, I hope, God takes you into the light, and this stuff like that. And it's like, you feel like maybe Jimmy was kind of like a surrogate husband to her. Because that's where, Clay kind of asks, you never remarried? And she's like, well, I'm still married, even though her husband's passed. But it's kind of like, is Jimmy kind of that stand-in, so you don't feel like your husband's completely gone?
I mean, they watched, Bride of Frankenstein together, and she's in, the... Her
PJs, yeah.
Yeah, the stereotypical, husband-wife, we're going to watch a movie before we go to bed, shtick. And it is, this very... Again, it's a melancholy movie, and it's a very sad kind of end to James Whale, but you feel like, okay, at least he had one final connection before he goes, and we realize what that connection really meant, because Clay gets a letter from James before he dies.
Yeah, he gets
the original drawing,
the original sketch of Frankenstein's monster. But before that, we get this dream sequence, but I think it's actually Jimmy's soul passing.
Oh yeah, it's literally in the night, right before Clay wakes up. It's the literal scene right before this.
Yeah, and we've had the black and white sequences, but this is, Clay is now the monster. He's in the garb, and he is guiding Jimmy through the war zone, and he brings him back to, the love of his life and his men.
In the trenches.
And lays him down with the rest of his men. And, made me think of Titanic. When Rose goes back to, where the boat crashed, and she's reunited with everybody that she felt like she should have passed with. So it was kind of that moment where, this monster that he didn't want to be remembered for really helped him and guided him to the ending that he wanted.
And that ties in exactly to the letter that's left to him, right? Mm-hmm. Because we flash forward, it has to be 10 years.
Yeah.
Because now Clay is married, he has a kid, and they're watching
The
Bride of Frankenstein. And for some reason, it cuts to credits in the middle of the movie. I don't know, weird filmmaking thing.
I love that the transition goes from that scene to when the monster meets the blind man in the forest.
Yeah, where the monster, this wayward spirit finds a human connection in this old broken man, and it's like, oh, so yeah, that's the movie.
That is.
And he shows his son this, he's like, I knew the guy who made that movie, and he gave me this, and he shows him the sketch and the drawing, and the kid flips it over, and we sees what Jimmy wrote to Clay.
Because we don't see it when Clay sees it for the first time.
Yeah, and we finally see it, and I think it says something along the lines of, to Clay, love Jimmy, friend, ?
It says, to Clay, friend, ? Doesn't sign it, just,
Friend, ?
Friend.
So, was this where you cried?
Maybe the first
friend,
time.
Friend?
Maybe the first time, but not this time. I've watched it a lot. I think I watched it couple weeks ago, 2 days in a row because it's just, I don't know, there's something about this movie that just
rolls with you.
It does.
And that's the thing where, we seen the movie and we're like, oh, Jimmy's creating Clay in an image to be the monster.
Mm-hmm.
And we are like, no, Jimmy's the monster.
Yeah.
What he put on screen, this monster who wanted friends, who wanted to be accepted,
mm-hmm. Who didn't ask for this.
He didn't ask to be born, didn't ask to be born this way. He didn't ask to be, abused by those around him and ostracized. He saw himself as the monster.
And especially with the stroke, he didn't ask for this.
And it's this very human thing
mm-hmm.
that I'm like, the movie, you put a point on it. Good job, movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then it ends with Clay going to take out the trash and it starts raining. And then he does the Frankenstein walk in the alley as this kind of little homage
and
to
that
Jimmy.
Was inspired by Brendan Fraser. He brought it to Bill Condon and he was like, hey, I think this would probably look good in the scene. What do you think? And they're like, yeah, roll with it. And it's like, who hasn't done the Frankenstein walk and pretending to be fire bad, stuff like that. Who hasn't done that? But I thought it was kind of weird because I was watching that scene the last couple times I've watched this movie recently, and I watched it again last night. So he's walking against that like chain link fence as he's doing the Frankenstein walk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the fence, but it caught my attention because the shadowing, when it changes from color to black and white in that scene, it looks like somebody's standing there, like somebody tall.
Yeah.
And I was just like I hadn't noticed it the first times I watched it, and I noticed it these last 3 times I watched it. And I was kind of like, okay, that could just be lighting, or is that kind of like a symbol, Jimmy's there, Jimmy's watching you, or the monster's watching you.
And of course it would be in a shadow and not like the bright light, because James Whale's is famous for these deep shadows, this expressionistic style. It goes to black and white into Jimmy's world, and yeah. But the movie's really good. It's a really good movie.
I love this movie. I love, the sequences going back to when they were shooting the bride, using, real things that were happening, Colin Clive with his alcoholism and Jimmy just being super supportive. And he's like, I know you don't feel well, but you got this. No one else can do this but you.
And the other thing is, even outside the crux of the movie, this is like a really interesting piece of like queer cinema of like this late 90s period, because it shows like Ian McKellen isn't playing a caricature. He's playing like a guy who's like very deeply like troubled, and his sexuality is like tied into his life, but it's not a thing where he's like, I am more than just the gay director of Frankenstein. I'm a World War I vet. I'm this guy. I'm an artist. I'm this. I'm that. And it's a very like holistic look at this guy who I don't know if James Wales is a queer icon. He's like this inventor of camp, and he's this.
He should be though. He's very important to cinema and to being kind of a pillar for being proud of being gay. I mean, Sir Ian McKellen, he's gay, and I love the casting. They got a British man, he's gay, and it's just like he.
I have something funny about Sir Ian McKellen. Ian McKellen didn't want to take the role because he didn't want to be typecasted as the old man, and I'm like, Sir Ian, you've looked like an old man for 40 years. I'm sorry.
But when you see him in the garb, and then you put the pictures side by side of James Whale and Sir Ian McKellen, they look like they could be brothers or related. It's trippy.
Oh yeah, and it's a thing because let's get to this point. This is an Oscar movie.
Yes,
it was designed to be kind of an Oscar bait, a little bit, right?
A little bit.
And it does get nominated for 3 or 4
I think
Oscars.
It was 3.
3. And it's Best Actor, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Screenplay. It wins Best Screenplay.
It does.
But it loses out to Best Actor. It loses Best Actor. Ian McKellen doesn't get it. And I know you love this movie.
Yes.
Right? Great performance. Oscar-worthy performance. Do you think it should have won against this lineup? And I'm going to read this to you, because it is... I would say it is a stacked fucking year, all right? 1998. So the winner is Roberto Benigni for Life is Beautiful.
Oh my god, that is a phenomenal movie. Yeah, I can see why it didn't win.
Now, you'd be like, oh, so Sir Ian McKellen, he was like the number 2 spot in there. Hold up. The other person, Tom Hanks, Saving Private Ryan. Next, we have Nick Nolte for Affliction.
Yeah.
And then this, you would think, oh, well, I mean, then Ian McKellen, right? No, then it's Ed Norton for American History X.
Oh.
And you're like, well, fuck me, Sir Ian, you got a rough year to fight in. But it feels like Ian McKellen, super Oscar-worthy performance. Like, I love the nod. Like, he definitely deserved it.
Yeah.
Like, this feels like it's such a personal built role. It feels like you're really understanding the character of James Wales. But I mean, like, you look at that lineup of Best Actor nods. Like,
yeah, that's rough.
Could you see giving it to him in that lineup?
Because I'm biased. Yes.
Because you're incredibly biased.
Yes.
Like, so biased. You're wearing a Frankenstein shirt next to a picture of Frankenstein.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, but
with my Frankenstein backpack, yeah.
Exactly. But like, I mean, that's rough. That's a rough go.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But like, to its win, its lead actor category, super stacked. Its Oscar win, though, I'm curious about your thoughts on this, because for its win on screenplay, it wins against Out of Sight, which is a Steven Soderbergh movie, very good, but the screenplay's not the best part of that. Primary Colors with Kathy Bates, Simple Plan, Sam Raimi movie, and it also wins against Thin Red Line, the Terrence Malick World War II movie.
Yeah.
Right? Is that a weak year for the adapted screenplay Oscar? Did this kind of just slide in on a... Was this Best Actors category so fucking stacked and the screenplays category so fucking weak that it was able to, like, do one of those, like, slides?
Yeah, I think so, because, I mean... I'm sure they're all great movies, but I mean, I think this one has the most in-depth story, the most, tug at your heartstrings kind of story.
The adaptation is also like apparently almost like 1-for-1. It is a very close adaptation.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other fun thing that I wanted to throw out there is this movie was also a fucking huge flop.
Yeah, it was, unfortunately. I don't remember the numbers, but it didn't do well, but the critics liked the movie.
Yeah, it was a $10 million budget, which we mentioned, I think, at the top of this, that it has a TV feel to it. Like, you can tell the budget's not a lot.
Yeah.
You can tell the production design isn't totally there. Like, you never feel like you were in 1957. You feel like you were in generic mid-century America, but it makes like $5 million at the box office, right? Critics love it. Everyone loves it.
Yeah.
They praise Sir Ian McKellen. No one points out Brendan Fraser at all.
I know, and he does phenomenal in the movie too.
Surprised he doesn't get a Best Supporting nod.
It's okay. He gets his Oscar years down the line. Well deserved.
Yes, and they both go on to have massive franchises that dwarf the gross of small countries.
Absolutely.
But yeah. So I really did like the movie.
Me too. I mean, it's one of my favorites. Discovered it really late. I found it in 2020. So. Oh wow. Yeah, it's not something that I grew up with, but yeah, I found it and I've loved it ever since. And I don't know why. I go back to it a lot and I just sit there and try to absorb it.
It is a movie that really works for its like incredible acting. Like, Sir Ian McKellen is doing a fantastic job. And kind of tying into the theme of the month, right? You know, we're doing a series on movies about movies. Yeah. And this is about a very sad legacy reality of that. It's about an artist kind of dealing with his creations. And the sad end of the legacy of, I'm an artist, but I'm remembered for so very little of my work. And I'm wondering, does this still fall into that category of a movie about movies? Absolutely. You think so? Yeah, because I mean, his life could have been a movie. And, that's how we started the month with, Steven Spielberg, Fabelmans, where, we see, the birth of a director, but also how cinematic his life was. And this is the end of the director. And this is the end of the director, where it's, his life could have been on the big screen with all the things that he's gone through. But this is a tragic ending where, it's not Scandal that's taking him out.
it's illness that's taking him out. But because he is such a strong individual and character, he's got to do it on his own terms.
And that huge thrust of the movie is the reason he's doing it. Is, yeah, he's losing his mind and his function, but it's because he can't create anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think the moment he realizes he's going to kill himself is when he starts drawing clay and realizes he can't create art anymore.
Yeah, because, I mean, he said that he hadn't made a movie in, like, 20 years, but he still had, you know, his painting and his sketching that he could do. And it's like, well, once that's gone, what do I have to live for? This has been my saving grace when the movies were taken away from me. Now what?
And it's such a beautiful, tragic end, and it ties into this whole thing about filmmaking. You know, there's so many filmmakers and, like, whomever you want to, like, think about that are like, my life is about movies, my life is about art, my life is about creating, like, cinema. And when that's gone, it feels so tiresome afterwards.
I've got nothing left to live for.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's the whole thing, you know, Martin Scorsese's in the, like, cycle right now because he's said that, you know, I'm 80 years old, and he's like, now that I finally know all this about films, it's far too late. Mm-hmm. He's like, I want to do so much, but he's like, I'm too old. Like, there's not enough time to do all the things I want to do. And it's like, the tragedy of age for the artist. But yeah, Gods and Monsters, sorry to, like, wrap up this month with some sad shit, but it's a good fucking movie.
It is, and I mean, I'm kind of sad that the month's coming to an end. It's been a really fun month of, you know, the behind the scenes of movies and, you know, how movies are made and, you know, the people that make it possible, and they're very much real people. But we have a bonus episode to end this month.
We do. And and this was the tragedy of the director at the end of his career. Now we're going to look at the actor tragedy at the end of their career.
We are. And I mean, there's no better way to end this month than with Sunset Boulevard.
Oh, Billy Wilder, Gloria Swanson, the
level of Kino in this movie is undefinable.
It is, again, one of the greatest movies ever made. It's probably one of the best movies about movies making ever made, and kind of like the sad, dark end stage of Hollywood. It's such a good movie.
And also ends with a pool.
Ends with a pool. They both end with pools.
They do, and I mean, seeing, you know, Jimmy at the pool in the end kind of reminded me of Sunset Boulevard, but there was also something beautiful and artistic, you know, when they have to drop him back into the water. And it's very much like he's doing a ballet when they drop him into the water, and then he he starts to slowly sink. And that's when we transition into the old man and the monster in the forest. And it's beautiful. And that's when the tears happen. But if anybody wanted to watch that, listen to that, where can they go? You can follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube.
Yeah, you can go to our YouTube channel, The Film Vault. That is The Film Vault on YouTube. Eventually, Dean will get around to uploading we'll call it a slideshow version of this podcast. You can like, comment, subscribe there. You can also find us on our social media at
The Film Club Podcast.
Blah, 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 blah. The Film Club Podcast.
The Film Club Podcast on Instagram, where we post daily stories, upcoming episodes, random things that we do. But stay tuned for next week, where we talk about Sunset Boulevard with cousin of the podcast, who will be announced next week.
Have a good week, everybody.
We'll see you next week at the Film Club.
Bye. Oh, wait. I fucked up the ending.
You did.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Peace.